for some reason, whenever a pawnbroker's on television and he does something bad, he's on the news, everyone assumes every pawnbroker does it. When a doctor's in the news and he does something bad, no one ever assumes all doctors are bad. It's just, for some reason, it's pawnbrokers. The thing is, Hollywood's vilified pawnbrokers, and it's just not right.
The secret that Adam Harrison carried for nearly 20 years was so well hidden that even people who watched his father on television every week had no idea it existed. Behind the success of Pawn Stars was a private battle that unfolded far from the cameras, leaving those closest to him trying to hold together a life that was quietly falling apart. By the time the full picture began to emerge, it was already too late. What was Adam Harrison hiding for so many years? And how did a struggle that remained out of public view end in unimaginable heartbreak? Join us as we uncover the full story behind Adam Harrison's tragic final chapter. The son America never knew. Gold and Silver Pawn Shop sits less than 2 miles from the Las Vegas Strip. It opened in 1988 when Rick Harrison was 23 years old, partnering with his father Richard to build something from scratch in a city that rewards audacity and punishes hesitation. By 2009, a History Channel camera crew had moved in, and the world met the Harrison family. Rick the dealmaker, Richard the patriarch, Corey the big personality son, and Chum Lee the lovable sidekick. For 15 years, millions of viewers tuned in weekly to watch the rhythm of that family business play out on screen. However, there was a son they never met. Adam Harrison was Rick's second child, born in 1984 to his first wife, Kim. Unlike Rick's oldest son, Corey Harrison, Adam was uninterested in starring next to him on Pawn Stars and kept a low profile instead. While he initially worked in his father's pawn shop, he later pursued a different career away from the cameras. Within the Harrison family, Adam was known by a nickname. He was known as Wax. When news of his death broke on January 20th, 2024, Corey posted a childhood photograph on Instagram, 2 small boys in a bathtub, and wrote, "Wax WTF, I will always love you, Bubba." Nobody in the viewing audience knew about the nickname. Nobody outside the family's inner circle used it. He was the Harrison who stayed in the background, the one the cameras never found, the one whose life moved parallel to the television empire his father built, occasionally touching it, then pulling away. Rick rarely shared anything about Adam on his social media before his death. In over 15 years of Pawn Stars, in hundreds of episodes across 23 seasons, Adam Harrison appeared as nothing more than an occasional Instagram post. He was a fact of Rick Harrison's life that the show's production structure simply never accommodated, because Adam did not want it to accommodate him. And for years, that seemed like a simple personal choice. A man who preferred not to be on television, pursuing a trade instead of a camera. The reality was different. But behind it all was a battle that almost no one outside the family knew about. And that battle was the beginning of everything. So, what were the struggles that defined everything? The losing battle. Rick Harrison has spent his television career projecting one of the most confident personas in reality television. The character that 23 seasons of Pawn Stars built is a man in complete control of his environment. Away from the cameras, Rick Harrison was losing a battle he could not haul into the shop and appraise his way out of. In his 20s, he had drug problems, and I put him in rehab so many times, Rick said in his interview with Graham Bensinger in March 2025.
Rick is still hurting, but he'll never show it.
No, I think about him every day. He in his 20s, he had the drug problems, and God, I put him in rehab so many times, and every time he'd be doing great, and then it would just fall back. I mean, you've heard the same story from a million people.
Every time, he'd be doing great, and then it would fall back. You hear the same story from a million people. It got really, really bad, and apparently it wasn't heroin he got. He ended up getting some fentanyl, which killed him. Rick Harrison, who had spent years on television successfully negotiating the value of Civil War rifles and Napoleonic artifacts, and signed presidential documents, could not negotiate his son's addiction down to something manageable. He tried everything the parenting playbook suggested: rehab, tough love, support, money, proximity, distance. Nothing held. Rick Harrison opened up about his own history with substances during the Bensinger interview, revealing that he smoked marijuana for the first time at 14.
I had a weird childhood. I mean, like literally, my parents threw me in a drug rehab because I was like, I wasn't a drug, I was just doing crazy shit.
At 14, right?
Yeah.
Well, but I think you smoked pot in like 4th grade for the first time, which, I mean, that's young.
And spent time in his own rehab program as a young man. Rick knew the terrain from inside. He had walked some version of that road himself before turning it around. He was not a stranger to the pull of addiction or to its logic. He understood what his son was fighting, and he still could not stop it. In 2023, drug overdose fatalities in the United States topped 112,000 for the first time in history, surpassing every previous peak, including the crack cocaine crisis of the 1980s. Fentanyl was responsible for the overwhelming majority of those deaths. Adam Harrison became one of those 112,000 in January 2024, and his father was left to reckon with the gap between everything he had tried and the outcome he could not prevent. But was there really anything that could have been done to prevent the tragic outcome? Let's check out how everything unfolded. The 3 months nobody talked about. The public story of Adam Harrison's death began on January 20th, 2024. The actual story of what led to that moment had been unfolding in silence for months before that. In a jail cell, in a guest house, in the increasingly erratic behavior of a man who was running out of road. According to a police report obtained by TMZ, Adam had reportedly been behind bars for months before moving into a guest house in the Las Vegas area, where he was found dead on January 19th. It is unclear what exactly the incarceration was for. The landlord said he needed a place to stay upon release and offered this guest house as somewhat of a kindness. A woman who lived in an RV between the main house and the guest house told police he demonstrated alarming behavior, including barricading himself in the house by pushing furniture against the door. He was in the grip of a substance that was making him paranoid enough to physically block his own exit. The incident report noted that his conversations were often lacking sound reasoning and mental clarity. He gave himself 2 black eyes during this period. He sent a Facebook message to the woman in the main house saying he was sick and would be quarantined, a message that served as the last clear communication anyone received from him before his body was discovered. On January 19th, the woman contacted the landlord, who went into the guest house and found Adam unresponsive in bed. Police found 2 vials of a redacted substance next to the mattress, along with foil with an unknown pill, lighters, and narcotic paraphernalia straws. The Clark County Office of the Coroner and Medical Examiner confirmed what the scene already suggested. The cause of death was fentanyl and methamphetamine toxicity. The manner of death was ruled an accident. Adam Harrison was 39 years old.
Some sad news to report. Pawn Stars Rick Harrison's son Adam has died. There are unconfirmed reports that he died from an overdose. Now, 8 News Now received a statement from the Harrison family, which says, "Our family is extremely saddened by the death of Adam. We ask for privacy as we grieve his loss." Adam Harrison was just 39 years old.
The secrecy that surrounded his final weeks was consistent with the entire hidden life Adam had been living. Rick Harrison had been managing this privately for years. The family had been protecting Adam's dignity by not making his struggles a public story. The tragedy is that the protection that preserved his privacy in life became the silence that made his death feel sudden to an audience that had no idea how long this had been happening. How did Rick take the death of the son he tried everything to save? And what happened in the aftermath of the tragedy? What was left? The Harrison family that Pawn Stars introduced to millions of viewers looked remarkably simple. Every episode followed the same familiar rhythm. Rick drove the deals. The old man delivered the dry humor. Corey argued with his father before eventually getting back to work. No matter how heated the disagreements became, they always ended the same way. Behind the same counter, running the same family business. It gave audiences the impression that, beneath all the bickering, the Harrisons were unbreakable. But television only showed the family that fit inside the frame. Away from the cameras, another story was unfolding, one that never appeared in a single episode. Addiction has a way of rewriting every relationship around it. It doesn't just affect the person using drugs. It quietly reshapes the lives of parents, siblings, and everyone trying to save someone who may not want to be saved. Over time, every conversation becomes a question of whether the person you love is telling the truth, whether they're safe, whether this latest attempt at recovery will finally be the one that lasts. For the Harrison family, that unseen battle revolved around Adam. Back in 2012, long before the public knew anything about his struggles, Corey Harrison was asked why his younger brother wasn't part of Pawn Stars. He laughed and explained that Adam had worked at the gold and silver pawn shop, but eventually became a plumber instead. When the interviewer jokingly asked whether Adam might have been jealous of his television success, Corey smiled and admitted there probably was some jealousy. At the time, it sounded like harmless sibling banter. Looking back, it feels very different. As Pawn Stars exploded into one of History Channel's biggest hits, the brothers' lives moved in opposite directions. Corey became Big Hoss, a recognizable television personality whose face was known around the world. Adam stepped further away from the spotlight, choosing a trade, a private life, and eventually disappearing almost entirely from public view. What few people realized was that, behind that privacy, he was fighting an addiction that had already begun to consume years of his life. Rick Harrison was living through his own transformation at the same time. While the show continued to thrive, his personal life kept changing. Over the years, he experienced multiple marriages, and in January 2026, nearly 2 years after Adam's death, he married Las Vegas nurse Angie Polishkin in a light-hearted Elvis-themed ceremony. To many people, it looked like Rick was finally turning the page. But grief rarely works that way. During his interview with Graham Bensinger, Rick spoke openly about rebuilding his life, while acknowledging that the loss of his son never truly leaves him. He talked about moving forward, but not moving on. There is a difference. The future may continue, but the past keeps finding its way into the present. Rick also revealed something that cast Adam's story in an even sadder light. He believed his son had struggled with heroin long before fentanyl entered the picture. In other words, the drug that ultimately ended Adam's life may not have been the one he intended to take. It was the final chapter of a battle that had been quietly unfolding for years, hidden from the millions of people who watched the Harrison family every week, without ever realizing one of its members was slowly slipping away. The opioid epidemic in America did not arrive suddenly. It built over decades through prescription painkiller overprescription, through the collapse of pharmaceutical oversight, through the flooding of communities with drugs that created physical dependency and then abandoned users when regulations tightened. leaving them to seek street alternatives that were increasingly adulterated with fentanyl. Adam Harrison's story runs along a track that millions of American families recognize because they are on it too. The rehab cycles, the clean periods, the crashes, the hope and the crash, and the hope again, until it stops. Now the question is, could his tragic death have been avoided if he had been working alongside his family in the shop? What that refusal cost him? There is a version of Adam Harrison's story that people tell as a choice narrative. The son who decided he did not want fame, who walked away from the family business and the television cameras in pursuit of a simpler, more private life. And that version contains the truth. Adam Harrison did not appear on Pawn Stars. He did maintain a low profile that was, by any measure, his own decision. But the choice narrative misses the weight of what that decision actually cost him. Corey Harrison, by staying and becoming Big Hoss, had structure. He had a camera and a schedule and a public identity. He had the shop and the show and the family business as a gravitational center. The irony of the Pawn Stars format, a show literally built on discovering hidden value in things people overlooked or forgot about, and Adam's invisible presence within the family that created it is almost too pointed to articulate. A show about the extraordinary concealed inside the ordinary, produced by a family that was concealing something extraordinary and ordinary simultaneously. Every week, Rick Harrison looked at something someone brought in and said, "This is worth more than you know." His own son was worth more than the public ever knew. And the public never knew because the family did what families do. They protected him. They managed the story and kept the cameras away. Adam worked at the pawn shop before the show launched in 2009. He was there at the beginning, before the cameras arrived, and before Pawn Stars turned the gold and silver into one of the most visited tourist destinations in Las Vegas. He was part of the original fabric of what became an international television phenomenon, and then the cameras arrived, and Adam stepped back, and that stepping back began the long, invisible chapter of his life that ended in a Las Vegas guest house in January 2024. The real secret was not something hidden in a garage. The real secret was that this was happening at all, that the son of one of America's most recognized pawn shop personalities had been cycling through addiction and rehab and jail and crisis for nearly his entire adult life, and that none of it had appeared in any headline or any episode of a television show that reached 150 countries. The secret was the invisible life. Rick Harrison's net worth is estimated between $9 and $12 million, but none of that money translated into the one problem he needed it most for. Rick Harrison had built an empire that few people could have imagined. Yet even after one of the darkest losses of his life, the business and the television show kept moving forward. So what happened to Pawn Stars after Adam Harrison's death? The show that went on. Pawn Stars did not end when Adam Harrison died. It had already been heading toward an inflection point that accelerated after his death. After wrapping its 23rd season in September 2024, Rick Harrison confirmed publicly that the show was no longer under contract with the History Channel. "We're waiting to see when we might resume filming or what will come next on the horizon," he said. Here's to Pawn Stars 2.0. The idea of Pawn Stars 2.0 was always caught somewhere between hope and reality. Rick Harrison openly talked about continuing the show in some form, but one major piece of the puzzle had already walked away. In September 2024, Corey Harrison packed up his life, left Las Vegas behind, and relocated to Tulum, Mexico, making it clear that he wasn't coming back. After more than 15 seasons as Big Hoss, He said he was finished living the life television had built for him. Instead of another season of Pawn Stars, Corey launched his own podcast from Tulum, alongside former Pawn Stars producer Jairus Cobb, joking with fans through the tagline, "YouTube thinks Corey is dead or in jail. Nah, he's thriving." He also admitted he had no involvement with the pawn shop anymore, and hadn't spoken directly with History Channel executives about the show's future in years. For a brief moment, it looked like Corey had finally found exactly what he wanted: a quieter life, far away from cameras, deadlines, and the expectations that came with being Rick Harrison's son. But that fresh start almost ended in unimaginable tragedy. In January 2026, while riding his Harley-Davidson near his home in Tulum, Corey crashed. At first, the injuries sounded horrific but survivable. 11 broken ribs, a concussion, a head hematoma, and deep lacerations that required stitches. He spent several nights in a Mexican hospital and even joked on social media that he was pretty messed up but good, apologizing to his father for missing his wedding celebration in Cancun. The real danger, however, came after he left the hospital. One of the fractured ribs had shifted and punctured his lung, causing massive internal bleeding that wasn't immediately apparent. Corey later required emergency treatment after doctors drained nearly 3 liters of blood from his chest cavity. According to fundraising efforts launched by friends, his condition became so severe that he feared he was going to die alone in Mexico. Medical costs mounted rapidly, forcing him to leave one hospital because he could no longer afford to stay before his condition worsened again. For Rick Harrison, the ordeal carried an almost unbearable weight. Just 2 years earlier, he had lost Adam. Now, he was facing the terrifying possibility of losing another son. Rick rushed to visit Corey in the hospital, while Corey remained bedridden and unable to attend his father's wedding celebration. Although Corey ultimately survived, the aftermath sparked a very public disagreement over his medical expenses, with Rick insisting he had already paid the bills, while Corey and those close to him maintained the financial burden was far from over. In December 2025, History Channel confirmed that new Pawn Stars episodes would film in early 2026, airing in 2027, with Rick Harrison and Chumley Russell as the core on-screen duo. Pawn Stars 2.0, without the old man, who died in 2018, without Corey. The show that started as a 3-generation family portrait has gradually lost everyone except Rick and the childhood friend who stood beside them from the beginning. Is there anything Rick Harrison could have done differently? Or is Adam's story the story of a disease that wins regardless of resources, love, or intervention? And does Pawn Stars feel different to you now, knowing what was happening in the background of every episode? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.